Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. For those of you here for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I'm a mixed media artist. So you can see in front of me today, I have some different items. First of all, I have two little spools of thread. I have an idea to elaborate on the last two videos that I did, which were making some unique collage papers. And I wasn't going to do a part 3, and I guess this technically isn't, but I don't know, maybe it is. It's kind of along the same wavelength here. I also have some Dollar Rowney acrylic inks there. I have Indigo, Turquoise, and Red Earth. I have some Liquitex Matte Medium and some acid-free tissue paper. Now there are going to be links to everything that I'm using in today's video at the end of, in my description for you if you're interested. So what I'm going to do is elaborate on some of the techniques that I did last week, but I started getting a lot of different ideas. So I thought, why not make another video and we'll see what we can come up with. So first thing I have is, there's a sheet of heavy grade plastic. It's just some plastic drop cloth that I got at Lowe's. And I cut my tissue paper into little manageable squares, and I cut some threads to be just slightly longer than the length and the width of the tissue that I have there. I'm just using an old brush to spread down my matte medium, and that's going to serve two purposes. It's going to adhere that to the plastic and also give it a nice adhesive layer there to lay down my strings, which is what I'm going to do in the next step. Now you want to work quickly so that everything stays wet. And all I'm doing with this first one is working in kind of a grid pattern. It doesn't really matter the order that you're laying these down as long as you are kind of creating these little spaces in between the threads that are roughly square, or, I mean, you don't have to do them in squares. You can do this in any manner that you like, but that's how I'm doing it for this particular video. So I'm just alternating back and forth. I'm not weaving them, although you definitely could do that if you wanted to. The reason why I chose to not do that step is just a time factor. I want to make sure that I'm working here while everything stays wet. Now you could spray a little bit of water on here just to make sure that it does stay wet for the length of time that you need. But this worked just perfectly for my purposes here. So the next step I'm doing here is getting another sheet of roughly the same size and shape of the tissue, laying it down on top. I put a little bit more of the matte medium on. This is also going to strengthen this collage paper when it's made, and I'm also using the brush to work that paper down into the little spaces in between the threads because I want those to be really adhered in there good. I want them to be embedded in between the two sheets. Now, if you watched last week's video, and I will have a link to that at the end for you, you will recognize what I am doing here. I'm just taking a bamboo skewer and I'm going in with that and also a little toothpick I'm using in case you don't have a bamboo skewer. You can kind of just use anything. What you're doing is clearing out some of those center parts in the holes, and definitely not looking for perfection here. In fact, kind of the opposite. I really want this to look a little rough and grungy, and really I want that earthy handmade look here. You may find when you're doing this that some of that tissue paper gets bound up a little bit on the tip of your whatever tool you're using. I just go ahead and kind of roll that off to the side. You can see me doing there and just pull pieces off. I have a paper towel off to the side that I am just collecting those little bits onto. And once I am done, I'm going to let this piece thoroughly dry. Because this is all acrylic media, it doesn't take very long. I think I probably let this dry for maybe an hour or two. And this is what we ended up with. So you just want to be very careful when you're removing this from the plastic sheet. I found a loose corner. You can make yourself a loose corner, which I suggested in my last video. If you just take an old gift card or even a piece of cardstock or something while the paper is still wet and kind of just push up a corner just to give you something to grab onto. I did find that those loose threads that I left there, it worked a little better if I went and loosened all of those first before I just started trying to yank this paper up. And incidentally, don't do that. Try to be very careful and just do it in little bits. You can see as I'm doing here, I actually let this part go in real time rather than speeding it up so you can see how careful I was being. I'm applying pressure to the bottom there, to the plastic, just to make sure everything is coming up nice and evenly. And if you do notice something starting to stick or that wants to tear, just come at it from a different angle and you really shouldn't have any trouble with that. And that's what we ended up with there. Now I'm going to set this on a piece of black paper and a piece of white canvas just to show you what that's going to look like on different backgrounds. I'm going to bring it in close here so you can see what we've got. I really love the look of these, and like I mentioned in my last video, if you purchase papers like this, they can be quite expensive. So I recommend giving it a try, making it yourself. And that's just some of the extra matte medium you can see there on the ends, but I even like the way that looks, that grunginess. Now, when you glue that down, that's obviously going to completely disappear onto your collage, but what a neat way to make a really beautiful paper. And it took very little in supplies and expense, and honestly, it really didn't take me that much time either. There it is on a white background, and you can really see the black threads. So I was actually going to use white threads to do this demo, but then I thought I'm going to use the black just so that you can see a little better on film what it looks like. But I absolutely love the darker colored thread. I think that's actually a dark gray and not a black, but I would use that again on purpose because I think it just adds something a little extra to the paper. Okay, so in the second example I'm going to do here, again starting out on my thick plastic, I laid down matte medium. This time I added a little bit of water to it, and I'm going to just lay that tissue down again. I added the water just to kind of extend the dry time on this just a bit, which is something you could do with the previous one that we just did as well. And I'm adding another coat of that matte medium on top there so that when we get everything glued down, it will stick really well and become embedded. So what I'm doing in this piece is just it's kind of a variation on the last one, but instead of making a grid pattern, I'm just doing these lines. So we're going to end up with a paper that just has the black threads embedded in the middle of it in long vertical columns as opposed to the grid. But I did it much in the same way. I am adding a little bit of the medium down right to the thread before I put the paper down. And in this one, I decided not to make any holes in it, and I'm just going to leave this as a piece all on its own. And again, I'm using my brush there to work that medium into each of the threads just to make sure that they are really good and embedded in between those tissue papers. I had some space left on the plastic, so I'm going to do the third example on there, and this is a combination of techniques. I did some of this in my last video. Again, check that out if you haven't had a chance. So I am spraying down this tissue paper. I crumpled it up first, and I'm laying it on the plastic. I'm now taking some Rowney acrylic inks, that is Antelope Brown, and this is Turquoise. And I'm dropping those in different areas on that tissue paper, and I'm going to add a little bit of water and just move those colors around so that they blend and create these lovely peaks and valleys where the wrinkles in the paper are. And I'll show you in a minute here what we get. This is one of my favorite color combinations of those inks. Highly recommend it, and I love the way this paper turned out. I am again just adding some strings here, and much like I did in the first example, I'm going to go in and add some of those like kind of grungy textured holes to it, but I just wanted to see how that would look with the colored kind of tiles that I've made with the acrylic inks. Again, I'm using my brush just to smooth everything down, and you can already see how cool that looks. I mean, you've got a combination of the wrinkles in the paper from being crumbled up to the texture of the strings that are going to be embedded in between the two sheets, and I just really like the way that looks. I'm going in with a shop towel, I'm just pulling up some excess water and excess ink from areas to kind of control the design, I guess, that I'm getting in there with the colors. And then I'm going to go over the whole thing with a little bit of the matte medium, once again really concentrating on working to get the strings really well embedded. And I'm taking my toothpick and kind of rolling some of that paper out in between those lines that the strings made on there. And this just is such a cool look. I don't know if it's a combination of the inks or the thread, all of the texture together, but it's so beautiful. And it gave me an idea for a piece, which I'm going to be doing on the channel within the next couple of weeks. I kind of have an idea for next week that I'll talk to you about a little bit too. But this piece here, this particular paper, gave me an idea for a finished piece of artwork. So stick around and I will show you what I'm talking about within the next couple of weeks on there. But again, I'm just rolling some of that paper out of the way to create those empty spaces. And then I'm going to let this whole thing dry. This one took slightly longer because I had a lot of water on it, but again, it's all just tissue paper and acrylic inks, so I don't know, maybe in a couple of hours at the most. I might have let it dry overnight just because I had some things going on, but you get the drift. So the next day, when I peeled those off, that's the first piece there on the left with just the strings in the straight lines, no holes. And that looks pretty cool. And again, on the back side, you can see it's much shinier. That's just because of the acrylic media that was right next to that smooth plastic. And that's what it looks like if you would put it on a canvas. And this piece, I just love it. I think it's absolutely beautiful with the acrylic inks and the string embedded in between the two pieces of tissue. There's the back side of that. It's even more interesting with some of the different creases and a little bit of the gloss. So many ideas. These pieces are just really kind of giving me so many more ideas to make even more and more really cool papers. And I hope they're doing the same for you. Take you in and show you the edge. Now I've left most of the edges on these pretty smooth, but you could hand tear these before you make them and kind of even turn that up another notch with extra texture. You know, the fun thing about playing with ideas like this is they kind of open you up to even more ideas, which is what happened with this next piece. I'm starting this in a similar way by just putting some water down and then adding my acid-free tissue paper. That is the Indigo color Rowney acrylic ink, and I'm going to just spray that down and add a little bit of the turquoise. So I've got the two different blue shades going together there. And again, I'm going to add a little more water and mix those around and just move the plastic to make sure that that color really saturates and gets into all of the little creases, which is going to give you variation in tone and pigment saturation, which is kind of interesting. Again, I just took a little bit of the extra water off, and then I had an idea to do designs with the thread in the paper. So I'm just going in and doing basic like swirl designs, and I'm working right off of the spool there and kind of just using my finger to guide the thread all around until I have the paper filled up to the point that I am happy with it. And one nice thing, because that's still wet on the bottom there, is it kind of holds the thread into place for you, so you don't have to worry too much about it moving. A couple times I may have straightened it out with my finger, but for the most part it just stays where you put it. And then once that's all down there, I'm just laying another sheet of tissue on top, kind of pressing it down with my towel there, and you can really see how the ink gathered around those threads, which were already dark, and really just made them stand out. Now I'm adding a little bit of water to some matte medium and going over the top of that again, and that's simply just to give it a little more strength and really make sure that everything kind of stays together. Plus I can use that brush to really work in between those thread lines to make sure that it's pushed down where I want it. And at this point I decided I wanted a little more color saturation in some places, so I just simply added a little bit more ink because, hey, we're just playing around here anyway, so it's not like we can really mess up because there's no real plan. For this last one, I had an idea to do kind of a combo thing with the ink and the thread again, but I was envisioning the threads being like closer together and maybe of varying lengths within the piece. I'm going to show you what I mean here in just a minute. So I went ahead and got my tissue paper adhered down to the plastic with some matte medium, a little bit of water. I'm using the Rowney Red Earth and Turquoise together, which end up being really pretty even when they mix, which you wouldn't think. I just love the depth of color that that gives. And then I'm moving that around a little bit, picking up some of the excess. I like how there are maybe some, I don't know, like empty spots, I guess we'll call them, where there isn't color and you can see through it. So not every square speck of this needs to be saturated with color. It's just going to give you more interest and more visual texture when you get everything finished. So now I'm laying these threads down at varying intervals, and I'm going to go back and fill a lot of the spaces in. For placement here, if you're not getting it exactly where you want, you can use a little toothpick, or if you have a bamboo skewer, something with a point to it that you can kind of maneuver, like I'm doing there, maneuver those threads around a little bit if you have an idea where you might want to get one versus just being completely random. And I am trying to get those, like I said, a little closer together because I already like the way that looks there, and I just think that's going to be so visually interesting. And I could have gone even further and laid a few of them going across horizontal rather than having them all going vertical. But, you know, that's just a design choice, and this is really, the possibilities are completely endless with something like this, limited only by your imagination and, you know, what pops into your head while you are doing this. And I do have to say, this is one of those purely creative endeavors where I was just getting one idea leapfrog on the back of another one over and over. I could have probably spent a week doing nothing but making these papers. And I enjoy the process so much that, you know, that may be something that I do. And I may actually start offering bundles of these on my Etsy shop. So I don't know. Let me know if you think that would be something that people would be interested in. Let me know in the comments. Definitely not like an obligation for you to say that you would or would not take them. But do you think this would be something that people would want? I mean, people sell papers like this all of the time, and I enjoy making them. So why not? I may throw a couple packs on there at some point. If anyone's interested, you can certainly let me know. And also, thank you so much for sticking with me through this video. If you like what you see here, if you could just give me a thumbs up, that would help me out so much. And subscribe if you haven't, and, you know, hype the video, all of that good YouTube stuff. But hey, I really appreciate it if you could do those things. All right, so now that I've got the top layer on there with a little matte medium, I'm going to start peeling these off and show you what we have. That's the spiral thread. Really like the way that one looks. That's got a lot of potential. You could do any design you wanted here in the middle of those, and I just think it's cool, and I could totally see that being used as a collage paper. Carefully peeling off the one that we just finished here. I like the way that the threads come off the end too, and that just makes it look rough and another layer of texture. Here's the front and back of that one. And here they are all together, everything that we've made today. So we've got that, the one that I put down there, definitely absolute favorite, love it. But they all have so much potential, and they all have so much to offer in their own right. But let me know what you think. Is this something that you've ever tried before, or if you're going to try it? I highly recommend it. It was the most fun I have had making collage papers in such a long time. But thank you all again for joining me on my journey today. Now, next week, I have some ideas to use some paper pulp. So it should be interesting, whatever we end up getting into. So I hope you join me then, and I will kind of lead you through some things that I've been working through in the back of my head. Don't know if they're going to work, but I do think that they should. So thanks again for sticking with me, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. Look forward to seeing you next week. I put out a new video every single Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a good one.